Well, it's the first crying corner of the new year. Did I think I'd be doing it this soon? No. But I feel like, and I don't want to jinx it, but I feel like for me, the beginning of a new year is always the most hard or stressful. Don't know why, but that's how it seems to be going for me at the moment. This episode, if you haven't read the title or the thumbnail, is about having an anxious attachment style. And if you don't know what that means, it means that we all have attachment styles, and they say there are 3. I'm assuming there are kind of sub attachment styles as well to those, but the main 3 are secure, anxious, and avoidant. And I have an anxious attachment style. Secure is someone who doesn't have either anxious or avoidant. It's very straightforward. They are very secure in themselves, basically, in relationships. Anxious attachment style is when you are consistently anxious. So something normal to you might be something like insanely bad for me. And I'm currently going through that at the moment. And avoidant attachment style is when you kind of shut down. You avoid communication, or you avoid processing what you need to in a relationship, or you're just very avoidant in general, right? Like, you just distract yourself and you're just like whatever kind of thing, okay? And it's kind of funny because it's a fact that anxious people usually end up with avoidant people. So you can kind of imagine how bad that goes sometimes. And currently that's how I'm feeling. But I think I went to my therapist 2 days ago now, and I was speaking to her about this, and I was like, I don't know why I react in certain ways. Like, I can't really pinpoint why certain things make me anxious. Other things make me anxious, and I'm aware that they make me anxious because they are triggers of the past or something along those lines. But other things, I'm just kind of like, why do I react that way? I don't feel like I have a solid reason to be reacting that way. It's really annoying because I think anxious attachment style people are the people out of all 3 of those attachment styles to kind of reflect the most and be like, fuck, I really hate myself, because like, why can I not just be normal? You know, why can I not just react the way this person wants me to react, or say what this person wants me to say, or be how this person wants me to be? Because we're anxious, and that's not a healthy way of thinking at all, but it's because we're anxious that we think that way. Whereas I think avoidant people tend to avoid reflecting, whereas anxious people, that's all they do. I think my point of like making this video is just kind of like, anxious attachment style is honestly probably the most common, and it can feel very lonely at times despite that, especially if you're like, just like, for example, in a relationship with someone who's avoidant, they don't get why you act the way that you do, whereas we might get how they act because we're aware. We're like hyper aware. That's what an anxious attachment is. You're hyper aware of like everything, right? And you blow it up in your head because you are hyper aware of everything. Also, my hair looks really bad, but anyways, we're just gonna move right past it. I'm going through it, guys. It's fine. I think I'm struggling with this notion that what I react like is wrong, because you want to turn around and you want to say how I feel is valid and how this person feels is valid, but that person isn't turning around to you and saying what you're feeling is valid. And so even if you have friends who will validate you and say what you're feeling is valid, you're still like, but is it? Am I crazy? Am I stupid? Why am I reacting this way? And my therapist in our session the other day was like, this is progress. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, well, you're noticing, you're becoming aware of yourself in a way that you hadn't before. And just what she meant was, I was always aware that I had an anxious attachment style. I've known that since I was like 12. But I think what she meant was, I'm becoming aware that the way I react, certain ways I react, don't have solid grounds for why I react that way. Other things do. Other things are just triggering. Other things traumatic. Like those are fine. But specifically highlighting the things that I can't pinpoint why I react the way I do, or why I feel the way I feel. For example, I'll give you an example with an anxious and an avoidant person. If the avoidant person needs space, which is very common because they are avoidant, an anxious person goes, this is personal. This is gonna, like, my life is gonna end. They're gonna leave me. The worst is happening. I don't know how to live without this person. I don't know how to breathe without this person. I'm severely depressed, right? Like it gets heavy. And my therapist was basically saying, you are becoming aware of how heavy you make yourself feel, right? Because even though this person might not go about having space in the right way because they're avoidant, not secure, a secure person might still need space, but they will go, hey, I need some space. Do you mind? I love you. I'm going to talk to you later, right? But an avoidant person will just disappear. And so although they haven't gone about that in the best way possible, especially with an anxious attachment style person, the overreaction on the anxious person's end is what I'm trying to eradicate. I don't want to be that way anymore, because I want to be secure in myself. And also this is kind of like another topic, but like there's also this sense of like impending doom all the time for me, because of my anxious attachment style. So it's like, when hypothetically, if me and an avoidant person are doing great and we're doing fine, the anxious attachment style in me is saying something bad's going to go happen. Things are going to end. This happy time will not last. And that to me is the worst possible thing, because it's like I'm stopping myself from enjoying love, from enjoying a healthy connection, from enjoying the moment. And that's what I want to be able to do. Do I think an aspect of it is my OCD? Yes, I do. I recently learned that OCD people can have tics, and that's what I do sometimes. Thanks, Jeanette McCurdy. But I think, like, for example, what triggers my OCD would be like an avoidant person just not communicating that they need space, and then taking that space. As an anxious person and a person also with OCD, my routine of speaking to this person, if there is someone I speak to every day, is disrupted. And if you know anything about people with OCD, is that they have routines, right? Well, there are different types of OCD. There are like hygiene OCD. There is like thought OCD, anxious OCD. Like, there are OCDs about different things. But the one thing that's kind of shared amongst all of them is that they have routines, right? So I don't have hygiene OCD. I mean, I do a little bit, but like my main OCD is like my thoughts and anxious OCD. And for me, having my routine of talking to someone daily disrupted is hell on earth. It makes me feel like the end of the world is coming. It makes me feel like I am in the end of the world, especially if that's my partner. And the thing is it's not isolated to my partner, because it will be for example, my best friend too. If my best friend doesn't text me for a few hours, I'm like, Florence, talk to me. I miss you. come back. And she's perfectly fine with it because we are very much the same. But when you're dealing with an avoidant person, that person is going to see that kind of thing as too clingy, too much, too this, too that, right? And you're thinking, well, if you have an anxious attachment style, you're thinking, well, how do I stop? And how does this person stop seeing me this way? You can't. That person needs to recognize first and foremost that they are avoidant or anxious or whatever they are. And you need to realize that you have an anxious attachment style too. That's the first step, is that both of you, or individually, regardless of who you're dealing with or what you're dealing with, you recognize your attachment style. It's kind of as easy as that, the first step. After that, it's kind of, I want to say that when I knew I had an anxious attachment style, I knew I was reacting the way I was reacting. But only recently did I really sit down and go, okay, but why do I act this way? And like, what causes me to be like this? And I don't want to be like this, right? And I want to say that I did that from the very beginning, but I didn't. I only did that like 2 days ago. But it's about sitting down and being like, okay, what things are triggers? Because those things are very different. So like, what things are triggers? For what reason? So for example, being ignored might be a trigger. It is for me because of the past. So that might be a trigger for you. That's something you need to communicate, right? With friends, with people, just in general. What else is a trigger? Them being online but not texting you. Sounds so harmless, right? But to an anxious attachment style person, that's like, oh my god, it's personal. They're not talking to, like, imagine me diagnosed anxiety, depression, OCD, and anxious attachment style. Can you imagine what my head sounds like? The best way to describe it is Skittles in my head, like bouncing off of the walls of my brain at like the fastest speed ever, like 1,000,000 miles per hour. And each Skittle represents a thought. And then like if a Skittle hits another Skittle, another Skittle is reproduced. So basically, when a thought hits another thought is reproduced. There's a fact, right, that we have 60,000 thoughts per day. I can guarantee you I have 120,000 per day. So can you imagine living in my brain? No, you don't want to, right? I don't want to either. And then an avoidant person might still have that brain mess going on up there, but they deal with it differently, right? The aim, I think, for both anxious and avoidant people who aren't stubborn in being anxious or avoidant is to be secure, right? Is to be secure in themselves, is to be secure in all their relationships. I would say because, for example, I've suffered more traumatic things within a relationship than... No, that's not true. I was going to say a lie. That's not true. I just realized as I was saying it. That's not true. But I was going to say, like, because I've experienced more traumatic things in relationships, that I'm more present and comfortable in my friendships. So I don't harbor, like, the anxious attachment style as much in my friendships. But I think the reason that I do that, because it's a lie, like, I definitely went through a lot more traumatic things with friendships. But I think there are 2 reasons, I guess, that I react that way still, is because, one, the friendship traumas were from younger ages, so I won't remember as much. The details are kind of foggy. And 2, I kind of worked through a lot of that at the time and present day. I've found people that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with friendship-wise, and that's reassuring. So I don't carry or harbor the anxious attachment style as much. I still do, but not as much in my friendships. But in relationships, the trauma aspect of it is still prominent, and it's still, even though it's in the past, it's still more recent, and it's something that I have been trying to work through it, but I haven't worked through. So it's like I'm in the process of still working through it, right? So it's not like I'm avoiding it, which is what avoidant people do, but I'm still in the mess that it feels the past created. And I think, like, at the end of the day, it's not an overnight thing, which is obvious. Like, that kind of goes for everything, right? For either avoidant or anxious people. I think my advice is, if you are an avoidant person with an anxious person, learn to communicate. Like, that's just such a visceral action that we need to understand as human beings in this life, you know, regardless of if it's with a partner or friends, family, children, pets, literally anything. The more that we learn to communicate, the better. But if you have an anxious partner or friend or sister, learn to communicate with that person, because this person, like, okay, anxious people want to communicate. Avoidant people don't want to communicate. But anxious people want to communicate out of fear, and avoidant people don't want to communicate out of fear. Everything is out of fear and trauma, and we all have our very valid reasons for feeling how we feel. But we have to work through them. So my advice to avoidant people is, if you're with someone or friends with someone or whatever the connection is with someone who is anxious, if you need space, that's fine. But say to that person, hey, look, I need some space. I still love you. Everything's okay. I'm going to get back to you soon. You don't even have to say a date or a time. That person is going to want that as an anxious person, but you don't even have to say that. The more you communicate, the more sustainable your relationship is going to be, and your figuring out process is going to be after arguments or individual crises. And my advice to anxious people is, I can't tell you, like, I can say to an avoidant person, oh, you need to do this, because I'm on the receiving end. I know what I need, right? An avoidant person is probably going to turn around to me and say, I need you to just leave me alone right now, like in the moment, right? And an anxious person goes, no, it's not possible. It's not possible. Like, I can't be like this. I can't feel like this. I'm left alone in this. I feel isolated. It feels too personal. It feels like the end of the world, right? So my advice to an anxious person is, recognize, firstly, that you are an anxious person in attachment styles. 2, pinpoint exactly how that shows through in all your relationships. 3, try to pinpoint where they stem from. Are they triggers from the past, from trauma? Then isolate the ones that don't come from triggers or the past or trauma. Those are the ones you're going to try to get rid of first. Because, okay. Interval. I'm filming, bitch. The rustling is so aesthetic. I feel like I'm in a Taylor Swift music video right now. What I was saying was, isolate the things that don't stem from triggers or traumas and all that, because those are the things you're going to try to get rid of first. And I think I'll give you an example, because it's kind of hard. I do think a lot of the things for me are triggers or traumas from the past, but I think one thing that I could work on that is more personal, I guess, and I can't really pinpoint where that goes wrong in the past, is my emotions when I'm left alone. Because, for example, my partner, who is avoidant, needs space. Me being anxious, it's the end of the world, he's leaving me, it's just the worst thing in the world. I need him, I need the communication, and that's also part of my OCD, is like, I need the routine of speaking to this person I speak to every day. When that routine is taken away, I feel very isolated, I feel very breakdowny, like it's bad, right? But one of the things that I feel like I could work on first, that probably the one that's going to be a little bit easier than the other things, is how I feel in those moments. Realistically, you are hearing your partner needs space and you're thinking that's not a big deal. Even if they haven't communicated it, they just need space. I'm hearing, I hate you, I'm leaving you, this is the end of the world, I'm never going to speak to you again. Even though this person hasn't said that and it's not what it means. So for me, I want to work on, my first thing that I want to work on is feeling okay when someone else needs space and it's not communicated. And that's still going to be hard for me to work through, because it's not just my anxious attachment style, but it's also my OCD. So it's feeling okay and like being able to look after myself and not going on autopilot in those moments, because I feel like I go on autopilot. I don't want to move. I need to be in my safe spaces. I need to be comfortable. I need to just be warm and cozy, and I need to not do too much, and I don't want to get out of bed. Like, that's the kind of vibe that it feels like in these moments. But today I have stuff to do. I have work. I have to go get my tattoo retouched, which I'm actually excited for, because like 3 of the letters are fading a little bit, which is fine. I'm gonna have to stay near my tattoo place for like 3 more hours, because I have to wait for someone who's dropping something off to me. And that made me so anxious yesterday. I was like, this person isn't speaking to me, and I'm supposed to go out. I was supposed to go out and see other people and talk to other people and live my life and do work and, you know, all this and that and normal fucking shit. And it's like, yes, you are a literal adult. Come on now, right? Like, that's where I'm trying to get to, is being okay when I'm left to my own devices, because I like being alone. So like, I like doing my work. I like playing Animal Crossing. I like making myself food. I like listening to music and sitting in a cafe and drinking coffee and doing nothing and watching Ginny and Georgia, which is the plan today after I finish my work. But when you add the context of, oh, I'm being ignored, or this person needs space, it feels so much more hostile being alone. It feels catatonic. It feels like if I'm left alone, I'm going to die. And I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm not. So right now, this is coming out tomorrow. So I'm filming this the day before it comes out. Right now, I assume I'm still probably feeling like shit. I'm probably a little bit alone. But today, my physical day today, hopefully have gone better in terms of I would have gone outside and gotten my tattoo retouched and sat in a cafe finishing some work and watched some Ginny and Georgia whilst drinking coffee and met up with this person who was dropping off something for me and picking that thing up and going home and settling down and playing Animal Crossing and chilling out, right? Like, that's how I want the day to go. It doesn't sound like it's a day full of anxiety, right? But if you can't see, I'm literally shaking right now. Even the idea of it makes me feel anxious, of doing that alone, because part of my routine has been disrupted and I feel scared when people need space. Because I think also like the aspect of like, I'm someone who doesn't usually need space. I'm either pissed off at you and I'm going to express that, or I'm fine. So when people don't express that, I'm like, fuck, end of the world. So yeah, I know this wasn't really like oh, I'm gonna help you out. I don't know what you expect from me. I'm the one in therapy, man. Like, there's not much I can do for you. But this is a crying corner. If you're new here, a crying corner is my crying corner. Crying corner with Caven, that's me. Where I just speak about things that are bothering me, or things that I think people will relate to or need to hear, and I don't want people to feel alone in. So if you are the same as me or the same as my partner and you're not secure in general, that's okay. It's very common and it's sad, and we all go through shit. And if you're not in therapy, the way I'm very lucky to be in therapy, if you have the ability to, I would go to therapy. If you don't, there are loads of free therapy services, and if you don't want to do that, I think my advice to you is do what I said. Work on yourself in the order that you can. Don't expect it to be overnight. It's not going to be overnight. Look after yourself. Try to communicate the best that you can. Try act without fear. It's so much easier said than done, but that's my advice to you guys. Anyways, hopefully tomorrow is a better day for you and for me. Anyways, I love you guys so much. Thank you for joining me. Let me know how you feel. You can always message me on Instagram if you want. I don't know what that was. Bye. I love you guys. Bye.